I've got absolutely no problems saying that Al Franken needs to step down because I don't think that Roy Moore should go to the Senate in the first place. Here's why. Here's why. If you don't know what's going on, Al Franken is now on the list of dirtbags who have committed some form of sexual assault and sexual harassment. Um, I'm sure by now you've read the article, so I don't have to go through it. But the only thing I want to point out from the article that makes me so definitively say I want him to step down is the feeling I got reading that article made me gag. Um, the way she described how Al Franken, Democratic senator from Minnesota, grabbed her by the neck, forced his tongue down her throat, and how she felt that she had to go wash the taste of his mouth out of her mouth. That did it for me. The picture was, I was like, the picture is crazy. What is he doing? He's a picture of her. He's smiling and she's asleep, and he's got his hands on her breast. And I'm like, what is he doing? This is so ridiculous and disgusting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Fill in the blanks. And then I turn around and read the article, and it actually made the picture worse. The article, the way she described it, made the picture worse. And then that's why I was like, I kind of knee jerk believed her. I don't know. It's nothing. It has nothing to do with me thinking that he's a dirtbag by default. I don't look at him and think that he's a pervert by default. It's just I believe her. I'm sorry, I believe her. And one thing I noticed this morning was quite a few Democrats sounding like Republicans. We said it last week, and I've been saying it, man. I don't care where it comes, who does it, who's guilty of it. I don't care if it's Barack Obama, man. We cannot have special pleading where we make an exception because this person is on our team. This is the absolute worst place to be tribalistic. Absolute worst. And the more I don't think I talked about it much on this show, but when hashtag Me Too was, when damn near every woman in America was participating in Me Too, you started to get the scale and the scope of how many people have been either harassed or assaulted, just outright assaulted. And you start thinking about the scope and how far reaching it is. Then you start listening to your colleagues, and you start listening to their stories as they describe it. And then they hear other people describe their story, and it triggers the trauma back in their minds back to, and listen, I'm going to be honest. I live in such a privileged position because I've never had to hear these stories because, one or two things, right? Most women probably just never want to have to talk about it ever again. And who was saying this? Somebody on Twitter. I should write down when I read something that is worthwhile noting. But somebody was advising the women two things in particular. Number one, don't tell your story until you're ready to tell your story. Just because everybody else is telling their story right now doesn't mean that you have to live through that trauma again in order to tell people your story. And I get that. Totally get that. And then they were saying, be careful. Be careful on your timeline and be careful on social media as you read all these stories. And what brings it to mind is just listening to a colleague's reaction to the Al Franken story and how she told me that she felt the same exact way when somebody did the same thing to her. How you have to get their taste out of your mouth, and that part alone right there is enough for me to be like, man, bye, Al Franken, go. We can do better. And then you start thinking about the scale and scope of it. I'm coming full circle. The scale and scope of it, and you realize that it's very likely that every man in Congress, or at least the vast majority of them, have some skeleton in their closet that is just waiting to come out. And that's why we said last week, if you are an elected official or you're a leader of some type and you have this type of skeleton in your closet, just voluntarily resign. Proactively, preemptively resign. But that's wishful thinking. People are never going to voluntarily relinquish power. People are going to have to force them out. And that's a shame. That's a shame because it's only going to make your situation worse. And it's going to force women, more important than anything else, it's going to force women to have to relive the trauma that you caused them. And listen, the other thing that makes you do is to reevaluate every relationship that you've ever had, man. Like every dude. And yes, I know people are like, well, women do it too. Fine, women too, but realistically, let's just talk about the guys. Every guy in America at this point has to be going through their entire catalog of relationships and wondering at what point did they cross the line, if they ever crossed the line. I sure as hell have been going back through my catalog. And I don't have to tell you all of my stories, but I will tell you that it just blows me away that here's an advantage that I have, and it's called empathy, right? It really can be summed up with empathy, but it's also the fact that you don't get pleasure in my world. You don't get pleasure by taking something from a woman. You get pleasure by her just willingly give it to you. Like, this is what she wants to do. That's the entire point of like intimacy and even if it's I don't care if it's nothing romantic and you just having a one night stand with a woman, but it's the fact that she wanted to give it to you. Like, you are the lucky one that she picked out of the group of people that you all went out with, right? Hey, it was the exchange. It was the fact that here it is. It completely what type of sick, twisted person? I already know the answer. You already know the answer, but I have to beg the question. What type of sick, twisted person would take that from a woman or force it out of her and find pleasure in that? Unfortunately, we're finding out the answer. A whole lot of people. And I've been, my naive ass just been living in la la land, not thinking, it's not as though I was thinking it didn't happen, because you hear about it in the news quite often, but you don't realize the scale because of how many women simply just would rather not relive that trauma. It's terrifying. You have a better chance of finding a woman who has been assaulted or harassed. How can I phrase this? The odds are you're more likely to just, if you look at a group of women, it's more likely that every single one of them have been harassed or assaulted at some stage in their life. I mean, can you just think about that scale? And the disappointing thing again is simply this, that people actually want to justify it or explain it away or say it was Russia or say it was the picture was photoshopped and stuff and it was part of a skit. And don't do that. Don't do that, because you notwithstanding the fact that you make yourself look like a effing fool, but you also are just making it, you're undermining all of these women's stories. I mean, when somebody, what happens when somebody comes out and accuses another Republican and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, we believe her, then nobody's going to take you seriously. And then that's going to undermine this entire opportunity in this tragedy. There is an opportunity in this collective tragedy that is all of the assaulted women in America who have been telling us this for all of these years. And some men believed them, most men didn't believe them, and the rest of them were actually doing it. Right? That's the thing. It's like, those of us who didn't know the scale and the scope and the magnitude of it, we may not have been doing it, but we were too busy, patting ourselves on the back for not being dicks, that we actually became dicks because we weren't hearing them when they said it was happening. And then the rest of the dudes out there, like, I mean, shit. I mean, what the hell is wrong? hell is wrong with us? God damn, what the hell is wrong with us? At what point did it? At what point in your sexual development? I know. Again, we know the answers to these questions. I mean, it's an entire culture that we're bred into. We're trained. And I guess maybe the exception to the rule are people who can grow up in that same type of environment, but not internalize it to mean that I should take from women and rob women and just and don't get it twisted. Like, I have gone through the catalog of my past, and I have seen times where I was far more aggressive than I should have been, right? But then, some empathy and human decency kicked in and stopped, right? And I'm sure, here's the next question, I guess, is not only have women who have been assaulted and harassed, just outright assaulted and harassed, but how many women have had to just say no, like, or say, whatever, right? Even in a relationship. How many women have had to push back because they just didn't want it right then, or they didn't want it right there. They wanted, they wanted it on their own terms. And then you call it begging, I guess we have songs about it. Baby, 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 please, baby, baby. It's like, it's in every aspect of our culture. This is what America breeds. This is what humanity breeds because of how we've commoditized sex, particularly sex from women. So Al Franken, he apologized. Back to Al Franken. He apologized, and the apology was pretty robust. The victim has accepted his apology, and she says that she 100% believes him, fully believes him. I don't think that should preclude any penalties, right? It's important in this day. It's important right now. What's important is that we don't allow these stories to just become political fodder, number one, become a media frenzy, but that there are actual repercussions that instills fear in the heart. I mean, literally instill fear in the heart of predators so that they know if they try this, odds are more likely that they will be caught. And so stops them from doing it. That's the only good thing that I think can come from all of these people having to share their trauma, is that we fundamentally change our society where no the first time means no. No the first time means no. All right, 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the discussion. What do you think should happen to Al Franken? Do you think he should resign? Some people are concerned about the political ramifications. Will that tilt the tilt the power of the, no, it's going to be fine. There's enough Democrats in power in Minnesota to make sure that a Democrat. So, we shouldn't have to consider that consideration. But realistically, there are people who 100% are viewing this through the eyes of politics and who's going to be the next senator if he steps down. All those things come into play. I honestly couldn't care less. Because again, I am appreciative of an opportunity to see an actual shift in culture, where this is not acceptable. Because as you grow up, and this is not an excuse for somebody in their youth, right? But I think the older you get, no, I got to take that back. The older that I get, the more I appreciate the real actual relationships, even if they were for one night relationships where it was a give and take, and this is what she wanted as much as I wanted. That should seem pretty standard. But now in my lateness, I know I'm late. I'm a little bit naive here, but understanding now that it really has not gone down like that on so many occasions for the vast majority of women. And so now we have a chance to correct that if we actually do something about it, if there are actual repercussions. If Roy Moore, check this out, if Roy Moore gets to the Senate and does not get put out of the Senate, then that is going to tell all the rest of the women who are who have never shared their stories, that's going to reaffirm the fact that men can get away with this. If Al Franken gets to stay in the Senate and nothing happens to him, then that's going to reaffirm to all the women who are holding their stories because of the trauma that it causes them, that they have to relive, that men can continue to get away with this. So we have an opportunity to actually do something fundamentally better in society, but it's also a chance for this to actually get even worse, where people who have been accused actually stay in power and face no real consequences, right? Like you go to counseling or you go to treatment like all the superstars do. Every time they do something wrong, oh yeah, I think it's time for me to go to treatment. Bitch, please, you need to go to jail. That's where you need to go. And so if there are no real repercussions for their actions here, then no, all of this opportunity for a culture shift becomes nothing, null and void, and we actually have made the situation worse. Because all of the women who would share their stories and help hold people accountable will one, be reliving their trauma, but then number two, realize, America's not going to do anything about this. So that's why I don't care who they are, what party they're in. I don't care what part of, if they're on our team, quote unquote our team, or if they're on the other person. I don't care. I think everyone in this season needs to be held accountable. I think every one of us who whatever we have to go through our entire catalog of our past, we absolutely need to hold ourselves accountable. And more than anything else, realize that shit does not fly anymore. And you know what else doesn't fly? Us being quiet about it. No, let me start first. What doesn't fly is men and women who don't, but particularly men who don't listen to and believe women. Because listen, the odds are in the favor of them telling the truth. Let's just be real. Let's just do a numbers game. How many women are out here lying about this stuff? I don't know, but I guarantee you there are more women telling you the truth about this than there are lying. Guarantee you. Guarantee you. Will somebody get accused and it be a false accusation? It's a good possibility at this point. But you know what? There are going to be so many more men who get away with stuff. So many more men who get accused that actually did it and don't have any repercussions. So I'm not going to sit around and worry my head over the number of people who get falsely accused, because you know what? Hopefully the truth will pan itself out. Hopefully the truth will find its way to light. But there are going to be so many more instances of when women are telling the absolute truth. And for years, they've been saying it. And people like me have been like, I don't see it. I've never done it. Just because you haven't done it doesn't mean it hasn't happened. And so that's definitely something for me and a lot of other people who are like me who, you probably didn't rape anybody. Well, congratulations. You're not a rapist. But did you believe women when they told you it happened? Or did you believe them when they were giving commentary on how broad and how far-reaching the problem was in society? Or were you like, oh yeah, that catcalling stuff? This is definitely me. Catcalling. I mean, aren't you? Do you feel like you're exaggerating a little bit, maybe? Because I've never seen it, and I don't do it. So, and then you have to see it to believe it for yourself.